Third phase of moon. Third phase.
Let's see, the UK
of moon.
and the government is looking for UFO reports from jet commercial airline pilots. But here in the United States, last year, the FAA refuses to take reports of UFOs from commercial airline pilots and is referred to the Bigelow Aerospace Program, which is quite interesting to me why they don't take the reports. The UK is taking the reports looking for pilots because these people have real character. They have the eyes to see what is a UFO and what's a regular commercial airline or a typical aircraft. Why do you think that the FAA is refusing to take these reports and they're handing it off to this independent Bigelow Aerospace Program?
Well, I think, in a sense, there's two separate questions there, and it's best to take them separately. The FAA, effectively, as part of the federal apparatus, I think the problem with the FAA taking UFO reports is that if they did, it would essentially be a contradiction of the wider U.S. government public position, which is we don't look at these things anymore. I mean, the publicly stated position of the United States government has been, since Blue Book was shut down in 1969, we're not interested in UFOs and we don't investigate them. So you see my point. If the FAA suddenly start looking at these reports, it's like, well, which bit is true? Do you or don't you do this? So now, here's, I think, what happens. Clearly, the FAA does need to know if there's some sort of flight safety issue going on. And I know from my work in the UK that we have the same position. The MOD's UFO project was terminated in 2009. That doesn't stop pilots seeing UFOs. Of course not. What happens, this is the critical point, is that most pilots won't make a UFO report, but they will effectively report exactly what they saw and just slip in the term unusual aircraft or unconventional helicopter, or if it's a radar operator, uncorrelated target.
Yeah, Blake Cousins, I know you had a question that we were just speaking off air about this. Go ahead.
Mr. McPope, in regards to Project Blue Book and its demise, the U.S. government shut it down. So basically, theoretically, they're not going after UFOs and the phenomenon. Let me ask you the hypothetical, such as the movie E.T., the Roswell crash, recovered bodies, possibly since Area 51. Let's just say if somebody had a body or a real live alien, in possession. They have them, they could prove them. Wouldn't it be impossible to even showcase this? Because I think this is kind of a national security issue. If somebody really had an alien extraterrestrial ET in their possession, don't you think the government would get involved? Because it would be kind of a national security, being with, germs that possibly the alien has that can affect humans. What's your say on that?
Well, you've, I think, answered very effectively your own question. Absolutely, yes. The government would have to be involved in this, and the potential biological hazard that you so rightly pointed out is one of the big reasons. Clearly, something like this would have huge potential implications, and the idea that the government would find out that somebody had acquired extraterrestrial technology, whether it's a crashed ship, whether it's a body, or indeed whether it was even a signal picked up by a radio telescope. And the idea that the government would be happy to just see this material put out there without wanting to have a look at it itself is crazy. I mean, I worked for the British government for 21 years. I hopefully have a good, knowledge of the way in which political leadership and indeed government and the military work. People would be incredibly interested in this, and in fact, whether the government has a formal UFO project or not is completely irrelevant. somebody would look at this. They would just do so, without using the phrase UFO. Maybe I mentioned earlier the way in which some pilots use phrases like unusual aircraft to get around this kind of, we're not supposed to be reporting UFOs, so let's do it another way. Somebody would be interested. I mean, let's make no mistake about this. The nation on Earth that first recovers and actually masters the secrets of extraterrestrial technology, if it exists, is going to be the dominant force on this planet for the foreseeable future. And with the stakes that high, does anyone really think the government won't be interested?
It's Johnny Webb in London. Nick, you say you sort of have an idea of what the government are up to and what they're into with regards to UFOs, but is there a high level of the British government that's secretly on this subject that's possibly at a higher office than what you were at the time?
The honest answer to your question is I don't know, and I suppose you could say it's one of those Donald Rumsfeld moments. It's an unknown. I mean, if there was some secret investigative unit operating at a level I didn't know about, even though I had a very high security clearance, I mean, in a self-evidently, I wouldn't know, so I couldn't say. I have to say I don't think there is. One possibility, and this is interesting that earlier in the show somebody mentioned Bigelow Aerospace, but one interesting possibility when talking about ways in which government could investigate UFOs while getting around this problem that officially they're not supposed to be, because Blue Book was closed, the MOD's UFO project was closed, is moving it into the private sector. Now, in America, this has the advantage, or two advantages. Firstly, it takes it largely outside the scope of the Freedom of Information Act, and it takes it further outside the scope of congressional scrutiny. So the idea that you would maybe put a highly classified contract with a defense corporation of some sort is maybe the way that the sort of thing you mentioned in your question, some sort of high-level investigative unit, that's where you'd look for it in the private sector.
I want to go back to what you were talking about, the alien technology. Do you believe that the government has already reverse engineered alien technology? I mean, going back to Roswell, if not even before, such as the cases that Stanton Friedman uncovered with the Cape Girardi incident in 1941, and some people say the Aurora, but nonetheless with Roswell and any other case?
I don't know. If the Americans did recover a UFO at Roswell, and if they truly judged it to be alien, and if they got technology, so far as I know, I'm afraid they didn't tell us Brits. And I can understand why. I think it goes back to that point about the nation that first acquired this technology.
I want to get back to, if somebody is in really possession of an alien body or extraterrestrial technology, and it's in their possession, and the government says that they're not investigating it, and honestly, if somebody had that, it's a national security issue, they are going to do it, and they may cover it up and not let anybody know about it. And in that case, there's a lot of eyewitness testimony and encounters with the men in black, strange characters coming to people's homes after they've had a close encounter or been abducted by aliens, possibly. Were you kind of considered the men in black of the UK, or are there men in black sightings in the UK?
There are one or two, but, it's a complicated one because, in a sense, the idea that suddenly a UFO witness is confronted by men in black who say, don't talk about your sighting, in a sense, it almost gives the whole thing more prominence and publicity than if they hadn't bothered. Now, having said that, how many UFO witnesses out there maybe have stayed silent because they were visited by men in black and told not to talk about it? Well, it's unknowable. It's literally unknowable. I had not heard that many MIB reports from the UK, and yes, sometimes we in government tended to wear smart suits. A lot of them were dark, so maybe we were the real men in black.
Yeah, in your investigations of UFOs during your years at the Ministry of Defense over there in the UK, you must have spoken to, many people that have had, close encounters of all the kinds, 1 through 4, and you had witnessed yourself a lot of videos. Let me ask you, do you, in one certain case, one that stands out to you the most, like a certain video of a UFO that was captured?
Well, there's a very good photographic case, but unfortunately it ties back to something I mentioned earlier in the interview. It's one of these photos that was sent to the Ministry of Defense, but when we came to declassify and release the files, the photos had gone, as had the negatives. But this was it was a fantastic set of images. It was a diamond-shaped object taken in broad daylight in Scotland. I've seen some artists' recreations of this on the internet, but for years, a blown-up copy of this thing was on the wall in my office, and the thing was battleship grey in colour. It was clearly a solid structure craft. Various Air Force and other intelligence imagery analysts in the UK have looked at this, and they'd said, yeah, the photos are genuine. The craft, we've calculated, is about 25 meters in diameter. There's no discernible fuselage, wings, so therefore, because it's just hanging there, it must have some sort of unconventional propulsion system or energy source, and we don't know what it is.
Do you think these photos were maliciously taken for somebody else's, private collection, or did they honestly, genuinely get lost? Where do you think these photos are now?
I know why the photo was taken. It was taken away because somebody, wrongly I think, but had managed to convince themselves that this was some secret prototype drone, that some deep black project that we didn't have security clearance for. And that's why it was locked away. And I know who locked it away. It was my former head of division, and he told me precisely why he'd done it, which was the reason I explained to you.
I kind of want to know how it worked over there when you were at your desk over there at the Ministry of Defense and in charge of the UFO phenomenon. Right here at Third Phase of the Moon, we receive reports on a daily basis, and a lot of people complain about the MUFON network and them dropping the ball in regards to following up on the UFO sightings. People contact MUFON, and they'll never hear back from them again, and I think that's why MUFON's kind of losing its credibility, and Third Phase of the Moon is continuously gaining in world popularity in regards to this. And how did it work for you? We receive it, we post it on Third Phase, share it with the world, and do follow-ups with the people that shoot it. Were you at the desk and people called you and go, I got a UFO reporting that I want to report?
Yes, we would get sightings. Sometimes they'd come by the phone, sometimes they come in letter, sometimes they come over the kind of internal military telex system as it was at the time. I mean, bear in mind I did this job from 1991 to 1994, and we weren't as high-tech as we are now. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, if I might, and it's one that I'm not actually asked that much, but I mean, to try and give you a sense of a typical day and how we actually did our job is I think, something which hopefully you and listeners will find quite interesting. I mean, I would come in, first of all, and there would clearly be a bunch of reports that had come in over the night. I mean, the investigative methodology for all of this is actually fairly straightforward. You would have at the Ministry of Defense access to huge databases of material about all astronomical and aeronautical phenomenon, anything that was flying, be it military or civilian. You either knew about it, exactly where it was and exactly when it was, or if you didn't know, you could find out. So whether it was military aircraft exercises, whether it was civilian flight plans, whether it was weather balloon launches, I mentioned the astronomical data too. We knew where everything was that was conventional in the skies. So when we got a UFO report, a lot of the job was just correlating the location, date and time of the UFO sighting with things in our database and saying, yes, there's a match there. This, for example, yes, large cigar-shaped object, brightly illuminated, slow-moving. Yes, we found out there was a football game and the airship was up doing the filming. That would be a simple example of an explained case. A lot of what we did was also looking into military radar data that we had. And air defense experts worked alongside us, and we would always say, if there was a visual sighting, was it backed up on radar? If we had a photo or a video, we had technical specialists who could analyze and enhance the imagery. But I'm afraid to confess that, in a sense, the problem you identified, i.e. not getting back to the witnesses, is probably something that we were rather guilty of, because our public line at the Ministry of Defence was, well, we look at these reports to see if they're of defence interest, but we consistently downplayed the extent of our interest. So what I'm telling you is essentially that we did a whole bunch of investigation, but we didn't necessarily brief the original witnesses, if they were members of the public, on what we were doing or what we had concluded.
Third phase of moon.